Virgin Most Powerful Radio, sharing the gospel with clarity and charity.
And now, Virgin Most Powerful Radio is pleased to present Hands-On Apologetics with renowned Catholic author and apologist, Gary Michuta.
And welcome, everybody. Hands-On Apologetics. You have entered into Virgin Most Powerful's Apologetics Dojo. Yes, it's great to be with you. And, finishing up a very strong week here on the program. And we're going to finish strong, right? That's the key to a good workout is to, that's when the muscles develop. That's when you burn all that the bad stuff, the fat, and when you get the best workouts, like when you finish strong. So that's what we're going to do here at the dojo. It's great to be with you. We're going to talk about a somewhat different subject. We certainly haven't touched on it here on the show. But as you know, we're living in an increasingly unchristian world. And there's always the danger, especially for those of us that run a business, as to how far we can cooperate with unchristian behavior. Where are the limits to cooperating with evil? So to help us work through this, and this actually, it sounds like a very simple question, but there's a lot of different parameters to consider. And so I'm pleased to announce we have Dr. Douglas Beaumont coming on the show today, and he's going to work us, help us kind of sort out exactly where are the boundaries, how far can we go in living in the world without cooperating with evil. So that's going to be a fascinating conversation. Can't wait to talk to him. He'll be coming up on the other side of the break. And as always, we're going to have our critical thinking exercises. And since today's Friday, we usually don't do an informal fallacy, but we do a propaganda technique. So the finding the fallacy, quote-unquote propaganda for today, is the stacking the deck propaganda move. And also we meet an early church father. And today's early church father is actually a big one, very important one. His name is Tertullian. So we'll talk a little bit about Tertullian, very important father, especially for those of us who defend the faith and use the early church fathers' writings. Tertullian wrote a lot, and he's used a lot. So we're going to talk about who he is, where he came from, what works of Tertullian you want to use, and which ones should you shy away from, I guess you could say. And it's time for our shout-outs. Hello, everybody watching live stream on social media, on Facebook and YouTube. It's great to see you. Figuratively speaking, virtually see you on the Facebook, Facebook page. No, YouTube page. What am I saying? YouTube page. It's great to see familiar names. Hey, Jose, Lucy, Ricky. Boy, I can't read today. What's up? It's great to see everybody. All right. FaceTube. Yeah, right. Maybe I should. Yeah, I made a new social media platform instantaneously. All right. Hey, Beth. All right. So we said hello to everybody. Thank you for watching live stream. Appreciate it. And, of course, thank you listening on radio and perhaps on podcast. We love to have you in the dojo. And, this is an opportunity for us to grow in our knowledge so that by knowing more, we can love Jesus more, and we can also explain and defend the faith with clarity, charity, and confidence. That is our goal, folks. And, as always, you are part of the program. So perhaps when Dr. Doug comes on, maybe you might have a question. You can always give us a call toll-free at 888-526-2151. That's 888-526-2151. Or you can always send your emails. And I'd love to hear from you. We have the Dojo mailbox. And, I got to do another mailbox show. We barely made a dent in the mailbox last show. But nevertheless, keep them coming because I love to hear from you. And great ideas, great questions, great discussions. The email address you want to send it to is questions@handsonapologetics.com. That's questions at handsonapologetics, all one word, .com. And that comes straight to me. I answer every email. And occasionally, I will even have a show, bring it up on the show. And that we can open up for everybody to comment on. So, we can pool our apologetic minds to study questions and scenarios together. So, good stuff. All right. Why don't we jump into the critical thinking skills area with the finding of the fallacy? Like I said, it's a propaganda technique known as the stacking of the deck. Okay, stacking the deck. Now, this technique is probably one of the most popular techniques used. It deliberately omits certain facts to fool a target audience. And basically, the stacking the deck actually comes from, gambling, where a cheater will put cards in a certain order so as to produce favorable hands. And the same ideas behind this propaganda technique. Basically, it stacks the deck with what the consumer, what the viewer, what the person will see, and what they won't see. Okay. Now this is kind of and often propaganda techniques kind of have kissing cousins with certain fallacies. This sounds a lot like the cherry picking fallacy, but the only difference is that it's not producing an argument as much as trying to persuade somebody to do something, think something, or buy something without actually making a real argument. Okay, so most brands of things at the store will use this propaganda technique. They will downplay unsavory details about their product or services. And like, for example, they will conceal quote-unquote hidden charges. That's probably the biggest one. And only talk about the benefits of the product or service. So that is, it's to be expected, but it's also a way of persuading people. So that is our finding of the fallacy for today, which is the propaganda technique of stacking the deck. So beware of stacking the deck, folks. Dive into the details. Also consider the things that they aren't forthright in their advertising. All right. Let's talk about the Meet the Early Church Father for today. And like I said, he's a biggie. It's Tertullian, who was born roughly around 80, 155, 160. Died around 240, 250. So a very early church father, not an apostolic father, but still very close to the apostolic age. He was born in Carthage in North Africa to pagan parents. And somewhere between the years 155, 160, he became a lawyer. And he actually was a lawyer of considerable repute. And he, after his conversion around 193, his expert knowledge in the field of law was turned to the defense of Christianity. So he's one of the best known, perhaps one of the greatest of the age of apologists, the 2nd century. Jerome says that he was a priest. However, that opinion, scholars aren't really sure whether or not Jerome was correct on that. Johannes Question, who's a foremost expert in patrology, remarks that the great respect of Tertullian's writings would be inexplicable if he wasn't a cleric. However, the thing is that although many early church fathers might quote from Tertullian, they usually do so anonymously. So it may not be so much that he's a cleric as much as he wrote a lot and he wrote well. So that could also explain his popularity. Concerning his writings, he wrote widely, he was read widely, and he was very influential. Let's see, he also wrote in Latin, so he's particularly known as a Latin writer. We'll talk about that a little bit. And apologists ought to know this, is that Tertullian began, he converted to Christianity, and he was an Orthodox Christian. He was Catholic for a number of years, okay? In fact, his writing span from 197 to 220. Okay, so it's actually, a good chunk of time that he did writing. But he has three different periods in which he wrote. The first period is his Catholic period, which is from 197 to 206. And there he gives Orthodox opinions. So for apologetics, that's where you want to focus on, is his earlier writings. Now, he began to be tempted by a heretical sect known as the Montanists. And the Montanists was kind of like kind of screwy cult, I guess you could say. They believed in ongoing revelation. They have ongoing prophets, and they believed that the New Jerusalem would descend from heaven onto Phrygia within their lifetime. Okay, so a little wacky, folks. Well, he begins as a Catholic up to 206 AD, and then his writing starts showing influence of Montanism between 206 and 212, and then finally he jumps ship and becomes a Montanist, and his later writings from 213 to 222 AD, he's totally in the Montanist camp. And while, as he's moving through these camps, he becomes more rigorous, more extreme. He also becomes more anti-clerical to the point of invective, and he tends to exaggerate the view of the priestly role of the laity. And basically, he outrightly admits the new charismatic prophets and prophetesses of Montanism. So, as us four apologists, defenders of the faith, you need to keep that in mind whenever you cite something from Tertullian. Keep in mind what phase he was in, because he rushed into the front door of the church so quickly he ended up rushing right out the back door. So you want to make sure his writings are during his Catholic phase, or at least like the semi-Montanist. You just still have to be a little careful. But you want to stay away from his heretical writings. Although, he might have a couple of comments that doesn't really touch on that heresy, but nevertheless is useful as evidence. Okay. Also, by the way, he's the founder of a sect known as the Tertullianist. He had some followers after he died, and eventually they kind of petered out and disappeared in church history. So they weren't very big or effective. So that is our early church father for today, Tertullian. Coming up on the other side of the break, folks, we're going to be talking with Dr. Douglas Beaumont about cooperating with evil. So stay tuned. It's going to be a fascinating discussion. You're listening to Hands On Apologetics. I'm Gary Machuda.
We got Ernesto from Long Beach.
I just wanted to comment, and I just wanted to thank you guys. And I kind of wanted to encourage people that are listening, maybe that are not donating, because honestly, I got to be honest. I used to think you guys were a little too
over the top.
Yeah.
That's right.
If God gave us a lot, and I have the blessing of listening to all this, and I just want to call all the people. I got 5 kids, and I don't make a lot of money, and I'm still donating to you guys.
God bless you, brother. You're amazing.
We have to do this. We have to do the extra. And it's not even the extra. People see it like it's extra. Kneeling for communion, saying your rosary, saying the Divine Mercy Chaplet. It is not extra. It's what the church tells us to do.
Amen. You're a good man, brother.
30 years old, 29 years old, 5 kids, and I thank you guys. But everybody else, man, get on fire. Fight for the truth, man. I know what I'm telling you guys. There's
I
so
love
much
it.
out there.
This is Terry Barber reminding you there's a women's conference coming up September 7th, 2019 at the Sacred Heart Chapel. Mary Danielle Barber will be speaking along with Barbara Nicolosi. They're going to be talking about true femininity. Be who you are. This is going to be for your daughters, your mothers. Every woman should be at this conference. And the way to do it is go to virginmostpowerfulradio.org or call 877-526-2151. Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow! That's 80%! realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
Hands on Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526-2151. Here's Gary.
And welcome back, everybody. Hands-on Apologetics. And the question of the hour is, should Christian businesses support unchristian behavior? Where do we draw the lines between cooperating with evil? Is any kind of cooperation with evil wrong? Are there nuances to the question? Well, to help us sort through all the intricacies of this question, we have Dr. Douglas Beaumont joining us. Dr. Beaumont received his Ph.D. in theology from Northwest University and M.A. in apologetics from Southern Evangelical Seminary. He's a convert to the faith and the author of an outstanding book. And if you don't have it, I recommend that you pick it up. It's called Evangelical Exodus, Evangelizing Seminarians and Their Path to Rome. He also has several other books that he's written as well, and he's a popular speaker, a catechist, director of religious education. And if you want to check out some of the great stuff that he's written, go to his website, which is www.douglasbeaumont.com. And in fact, you can see the article, which our discussion today is based on that website, because there's a lot of details to it. So if you're driving and you can't write down notes, go to douglasbeaumont.com and you could look up the article. And Dr. Doug, welcome to Hands-On Apologetics.
Great to be back, Gary. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's always a pleasure to have you on. You bring such a fresh perspective on things. And this is a really interesting article. I'm glad that I came across it because we're surrounded by increasingly, anti-Christian culture. And how do we interact with that, especially if you have a business? There's a problem of, can we support evil? Can we support things that are really unchristian?
Yeah, it sounds like such a simple question, right? Because
yeah.
the obvious answer sounds like no. Well, of course you wouldn't support evil. Why would you?
Right.
And in many cases, it is that simple. Should I do X? Well, X is evil. Well, then don't.
Yeah, right.
This guy over here is doing X. X is evil. Should I help him? No. The end. But I think that what ends up happening is once we dig below maybe the headlines and that sort of thing, there are actually quite a number of detailed things we need to think about. It's not as simple as just supporting evil or not, because our relation to that evil act can vary by degrees. And at some point, everybody says yes.
Yeah.
To some degree, everybody every single day is involved in activities that at least very well could support evil. And that's because we live in a fallen world. We live in a world of finite goods, of limited goods, and evil can come from practically anything we do. I was telling my son the other day as we were driving a car, we were just discussing some things that people do, martial arts or extreme sports and stuff that are dangerous. And I said, well, buddy, right now in this car, you and I are doing something that kills more people in America than practically anything else. Yeah. And as a culture, we have just agreed that it's worth the good that it comes from having vehicles, to mitigate the bad. And so it's not always as simple as just whether you support evil or not.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you could say a prayer of a prayer book. The prayer book that you bought could be done by a publisher that's owned by a large conglomerate that also publishes a lot of anti-Christian stuff. So, are you cooperating with evil by buying a prayer book? It's
right.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think that's a good example to kind of get into the discussion and show that there is a bit more to this. That when we talk about cooperation, we're talking in maybe a more philosophical sense where it's not necessarily direct support. And so part of the analysis that we go through whenever we want to make a decision about what we should or should not do, there are a number of things we can look at that help us determine, am I just cooperating with evil, or am I just doing something that in any way, any shape or form supports it? And that's what we mean by cooperation here.
Right. Very good. Yeah, so... And, that's good, not only for a business owner, which I'm sure that's probably where it really gets sticky, because you have to deal with other businesses and persons and so on. But even just an ordinary person, we should always do our best to certainly not cooperate with evil or support evil, but to avoid that as much as possible.
Yeah, and I think the business aspect is what really keyed my interest for this particular article that you mentioned in the introduction, because my wife had a pretty thriving cake business that she did out of our home when we lived back in North Carolina, and when this when the Masterpiece Cake Shop scandal erupted, and this poor guy Jack Phillips out in Colorado, he's on his third lawsuit now. The homosexual activists just they come after him, practically every year. She was talking to me and said, "Look, there's several homosexual people at the this other place where I work. Some of them, we had the law passed that validated these alleged homosexual unions." And she said, I'm kind of afraid. I mean, any day now, one of them could ask me if I would make a cake for a homosexual union now that it's legal, and I got to figure out what I'm going to say, because we're just a little family with a few kids. We're not Cake Boss. We can't afford this. So I dug in pretty deep, and that's really where this article came from.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, that's so you're in the same business. I mean, at least your wife is. So that certainly hit close to home.
Yeah, we fortunately I got a new job and we didn't need the side business anymore, so we just got out of it. But yeah, I followed this very closely, and in fact, I kind of my main source of information was Dr. David Oderberg. He is a philosopher out of the University of Reading in the UK. And he wrote an excellent article. It's now been expanded to a book, which you can get for free, by the way. It's called Opting Out. I'm sure if you Google it, David Oderberg Opting Out, you can just download it.
Okay.
But, he and I actually ended up submitting amicus briefs based on his work and my work that was based on his work to the case. I don't know if it ever helped out or anything. But his information was fantastic. He gives a really good orthodox, classical, philosophical analysis of the issue, and that's really what I launched from.
Okay, yeah. Now, is he the one that wrote a book on the new essentialism?
That sounds like him. Yeah, I don't. I haven't followed his other writings that much, but yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, cool. So that's so the article you have on your site really breaks down like all the parameters. Now, like you said, it seems like it's such a simple question. Should we cooperate with evil? Well, obviously no. But there are a lot of like I said, parameters that can change whether or not what degree do you cooperate with evil, or whether it's direct or indirect. What are some of those parameters?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I just do want to say, going into this, two caveats. Number one, for those that don't maybe involve themselves in a lot of philosophy, this can sound very nitpicky. It can almost sound like you're just sort of trying to find a way around what should be a black and white issue. And what I would say to that is that no, all of us actually go through this analysis every time we make a moral decision. We just may not have all the verbiage.
Yeah, right.
I think once it's explained with some good examples, people just go, oh, well, yeah, of course. And then the other thing is that even with all of this maybe more philosophically rigorous attention to the question, it never achieves the level of math. It never gets to the point where you can just plug in the numbers and outspits the answer, yes, you should do this, or no, you shouldn't. It's still difficult, but what I like about this analysis is that it helps people at least understand, okay, here are the things I need to be thinking about. So just to jump into it, when we evaluate any moral action, there are really three major questions that get asked, and cooperation is going to be distinct from that. But just to kind of go through the first three. First, we want to talk about the object of the act. Like, what am I actually doing? Is it moral or not? So that's the first question.
Okay.
The second is what is the intent of the person committing the act? And then the third is the circumstances that the act is taking place in. So, for example, we can talk about maybe driving 75 miles an hour. Okay, so should I do this? There's the question. So now we have our object. Our object is driving 75 miles an hour. Now, the simple act of driving 75 miles an hour is basically morally neutral. You know, there isn't anything intrinsically right or wrong about it. It's just there. We can look at intent. Okay, maybe I'm just trying to be efficient. You know, I just want to get from point A to point B and not waste a lot of time. Okay, that's a good intent. And then the circumstances. Well, as it turns out, the speed limit is 55. Okay, so now I'm committing an immoral act because I'm breaking the law. Even though what I'm doing is not intrinsically evil, like murder or rape, and even though I have a good intent, I am breaking the law. So to that extent, yes, now I'm acting immorally. If my intent is to get away from the police because I just robbed a bank, okay, now it's an immoral act again.
Right.
If I'm driving 75 miles an hour through a neighborhood filled with children because I'm kind of hoping, you know, I'll get rid of a few of them, now you know you've blown it all the way through, and there's absolutely no morality involved at all. And so that's why these three different things have to be considered, because the simple action, I mean, very few simple actions have any kind of moral import. It's really once we understand what the intent and what the circumstances are that it becomes a little bit more difficult to assess.
Yeah. So something could. Most things aren't intrinsically evil. In other words.
Right. You know, usually when you if you say, well, this thing is just intrinsically evil, it's usually a complex action. So, for example, we have the single word rape. Okay, but what a rape is always intrinsically evil. But what rape is a whole bunch of things put together. You know, it's not just sex, it's not just violence, it's not just, you know, intent to harm. All these things, you know, it's sort of a single word for kind of a recipe for an action. You know, pulling the trigger on a gun. I mean, if you just break down the physical activity of pulling a trigger, well, of course, there's no moral import to that at all. You have to look at the circumstances. Where is the gun pointed? Why is the gun pointed that way, et cetera? And that's really where morality typically enters in.
Okay. Yeah. Very good. Yeah. So those are the three ones: the object, the intent, and circumstance. And I hear the music coming up, so this is actually a good place to break. We are talking with Dr. Douglas Beaumont about living and acting in an unchristian world and cooperating with evil. What parameters should we look at? How should we base our decisions? More to come on the other side of the break. You're listening to Hands On Apologetics.
Hi, this is Barbara Nicolosi, and we're having a women's conference here at the Sacred Heart Chapel in Covina on September 7th, 2019. This is going to be a great, great day for you to come and meet a bunch of new friends, wonderful Catholic women who want to deepen their Catholic faith and their understanding of themselves as women. You know, this era right now we're in, so much confusion. What is it to be a man? What is it to be a woman? You know, the Catholic Church has a lot to say about this, and we're going to hear about them. We're going to hear about John Paul II's letter on women that he wrote from Mary Danielle Barber is going to talk about that. She's going to talk about Mary as a model for all of us. It's a topic that we can never reflect on too much. I'm going to talk about Teresa of Avila and the interior castle and how mystical marriage is what all of us should be called to, or are called to as Catholics in our prayer lives, and especially as women in the church. Aileen Blakowski is going to talk about motherhood and homeschooling. And then finally we have Father Charles Murray. He's going to be the celebrant of the Eucharist. He's going to be here hearing confessions. It's going to be an amazing day. We're going to have an hour of adoration together, time to pray, time to laugh, eat, reflect, grow in our passion for our Catholic faith and our identity as Catholic women. You don't want to miss it. You want to come. You want to bring your friends. You want to bring your daughters, your nieces. That's really an affordable day. So go to virginmostpowerfulradio.org, and you can register for this conference or call 877-526-2151. The Women's Conference is going to be a great event for the Archdiocese of Los Angeles area, Southern California Catholics. You don't want to miss it.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show, and they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow, that's 80%. realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
This is Jesse Romero. You're listening to Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Machuda on Virgin Most Powerful Radio.
Behavior. And Doug, you you gave us some great perimeters to start off with. You break down the morality of the action in terms of object, intent, and circumstance, and you showed how it's really those three and the interaction of those three that really determine whether something's right or wrong. I guess that's the best way to put it.
Yeah, it's kind of the what, why, and how of the situation. And again, I'm giving kind of the classic vocabulary there, but you're really just asking what are you doing, why are you doing it, and how is this being done? And those three things are really going to deliver whether or not the action is moral or immoral. So for those three, typically these come up when we're talking about what's called the principal agent. Okay, so this is the person who is committing the action. If I want to know if I am going to do something, I am the principal agent because I'm the one doing it. But what we're talking about here is more about cooperation. So since the topic is cooperation with evil, we'll just assume that 1, 2, and 3, we've gone through that analysis, and yes, this principal agent is doing something immoral. Okay? So then the question becomes, to what degree can I assist that person in what they're doing?
Okay. Yeah, and that's a biggie. So, yeah.
Sure.
So, are there perimeters to determining to what extent cooperation is, or the nature of the cooperation?
Yeah, definitely, and there's a lot here. So this is really where we kind of pick up on this article, on Oderberg's article, and really the question of the cake shop. Because we can just assume as Christians that a homosexual union is an immoral act. Now we can argue that on a different show, but that is where Christians are coming from, and this is part of the reason I wrote the article, was not to argue who was right about the morality of a homosexual union, but rather should someone be forced to participate with it? Because of course you get this, it's just a cake, baking a cake isn't performing a homosexual union. It's not a gay marriage. So even a lot of Christians, I think, got confused about why he would take a stand here. So here are some of the considerations. So going back to the object, what's actually happening here. The first thing we want to know is and we talked about intrinsic evil. If an act is intrinsically evil, what that means is that just doing it is evil, regardless of any effects.
Okay.
So you could we talked about rape. Okay, we can say rape is an intrinsic evil because even if you can mitigate the bad effects of a rape, it's still wrong. Okay, so whether somebody rapes a young woman in the street in a back alley, or a comatose patient in a hospital that will never even know it happened, and not suffer any ill effects really, it's still completely evil, and that makes it intrinsically evil.
Okay.
It's just evil as such. It's not just evil because sometimes there's bad effects. And so when it comes to the morality of an object, if something's intrinsically evil, it is always immoral to cooperate with that act. There's no way around it.
Okay.
And I think that this is what most people think of when you say, should I cooperate with evil, is that what pops into their head is something like this. You've got an intrinsically evil act, and you're helping somebody. Okay, so that would never, ever be okay, because there's no way to make an intrinsically evil act good.
Yeah. So you become an accessory to it, in other words.
Yeah, to some degree. Now, again, we're talking about degrees of distance here with the cooperation, but these acts are always immoral. There's no way around it. So you can't say, well, I'm raping this woman for a good reason.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Very good.
And then we want to look at sort of the standard. Like, what is it that makes this act immoral? Is it unjust or is it unlawful? So here's the next question. So something that is unjust actually brings harm, to an innocent person. It's a violation of justice itself, whether or not it's against the law. So, for example, you can have unjust actions that are lawful. We think about Nazi Germany. They did things that were against justice, but it wasn't against the law. Most Christians would say abortion, same way. Okay, it's legal, but it's unjust. And so an unjust action is worse than something that's just unlawful. Because, again, you might have a situation where in one country something's legal and in another one it's not, but the act itself, if it's unjust, it doesn't really matter what the law says. It's always worse.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's important to keep in mind too. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, the next consideration is if it is against some law, is it just like the government saying don't do something, or is it more of a natural law type situation? So again, rape is against the natural law. That is something that is unjust. It is by nature evil. Violating the speed limit, that's not against natural law. That's just somebody put a sign up. It says 5.5 on it, and now you can get a ticket.
Right.
So when we talk about the standard, violating the natural law that says what justice is always going to be worse than breaking a law just by itself.
Okay. Yeah, that
so
makes sense.
As you can see, we are starting to see that there's better and worse actions, right? So intrinsically evil is always worse than just one that is evil by effect. Undermining justice is worse than just undermining the law. And then, of course, we want to just see how serious it is. What's the gravity of this act? Is this going to produce a large impact or a small impact? And so what those do is they don't necessarily say that something is good or bad or okay or not okay, but they do let you see that there is a reason that there's kind of a spectrum here.
Okay, yeah. So let's apply to making a cake.
Right. Okay. So this is interesting, I think, because and this is not something I've heard very many people talk about with this issue, but if you really want to get down to the nitty gritty, the homosexual union, I would say, is an intrinsic evil because it is directly affirming something that goes against justice and goes against natural law. However, the cake is not actually part of the wedding. The cake is really part of a party that happens after the wedding. So I think that actually becomes a pretty big deal because whether a baker sees themselves as cooperating with the ceremony versus with the party, that there's a lot of distance there between the evil that the ceremony itself is supporting and what the party's about. Now, it is a celebration of something that is itself a celebration of something evil, but you do see that you're now another degree removed.
Yes, right.
So we talk about the wedding cake, but the cake is not really part of the wedding. The principal actors of the wedding are the officiant and the couple. The cake is in another building somewhere. If you got rid of the cake, the ceremony would not be affected one bit.
Right.
So I think that does introduce another degree of separation there. Is it unjust? Well, yes, this is an issue of homosexual acts are an issue of justice, not just legality. Okay, so California legalizes it, doesn't legalize it, doesn't matter. This is an issue of justice. So this is a pretty serious evil. The impact, I think it's a serious impact in that it legitimizes something that is illegitimate. Whether or not a single ceremony has a huge impact or not, hard to say. Is this thing going to be in the news? Yeah. So I think that now that we've sort of evaluated what the action is, and again, I think the big question there is what is the cake actually a part of? Then we have to look at cooperation, and that kind of brings up a whole other list of considerations.
Well, that's philosophy. It's distinctions. That's
right.
That's the name of the game.
Absolutely. But again, I think most people, once they understand what all these words mean, they go, oh, yeah, we kind of, this is all pretty intuitive stuff, I think, once you get to this level. So, for this, we can talk about, let's just talk about something that's not so emotionally charged. Let's talk about robbing a bank. Okay, so, Gary Michuta has decided to rob a bank, and he's got good intent, but it's not enough because it's an intrinsic evil. So you're still being a bad guy. But you've asked me for help, right?
Okay.
So the first question is the cooperation that I would be providing you, is it formal or material? Okay, so in philosophical terms, formal means that really is tied to the intent. And then the material, the actual action itself, like what am I actually doing? So, for example, I could cooperate with you. I could help you rob the bank, even if I don't want the bank robbed and I don't want you to do it. So, for example, I have a gun pointed at my head. Here, hold this bag of money, or I'm going to shoot you in the head. Okay, well, I'm going to hold the bag, right?
Yeah, right.
But not because I want the bank robbed. So, if we are formally cooperating, what that means is we are actually having the same intent as the principal agent. So you want to rob the bank, you hand me the bag of money, and you say, hey, I'll give you half of this money if we make it out of here. And I go, right on, I want this money. Now I'm formally cooperating with you because now I want the bank to be robbed, right?
Okay.
Whereas if I hold the money because I don't want to be shot,
yeah, right.
I may be doing the exact same thing, but I'm doing it for a completely different reason than you are. And so that's just material cooperation versus formal. Okay. And so that's another one of these degrees of distance where if I'm only cooperating materially with evil, I've distanced myself from that evil, perhaps, to infinity. I mean, if I'm being forced to do it, of course, there's no moral analysis at all anymore. But, we can imagine situations where somebody cooperates materially. Like, let's say I sell you the bags that you go rob the bank with. I don't even know you're going to rob the bank. But technically, I have cooperated. I mean, I have helped you rob the bank because now you have bags when once you didn't. But my goal in selling you the bags was to make some money in my bag business.
Yeah, right.
I didn't even know you were going to rob the bank. So that's why I say when we talk about cooperation, we're really talking about anything that supports an action, even if the person doesn't even know it's supporting an action. So to be formally cooperative with evil is always going to be wrong, but materially only, not necessarily.
Okay, very good. Well, we're chatting with Dr. Douglas Beaumont about, cooperation with evil. And there's more to come on the other side of the break. You're listening to Hands On Apologetics. I'm Gary Michuta. Stay tuned, everybody.
I kind of wanted to encourage people that are listening, maybe that are not donating, because honestly, I got to be honest, I used to think you guys were a little too
over the top.
Yeah.
That's right.
If God gave us a lot, and I have the blessing of listening to all this, and I just want to call all the people, I've got 5 kids, and I don't make a lot of money, and I'm still donating to you guys.
God bless you, brother. You're amazing.
We have to do this. We have to do the extra. And it's not even the extra. People see it like it's extra. Kneeling for communion, saying your rosary, saying the Divine Mercy Chaplet. It is not extra. It's what the church tells us to do.
Amen. You're a good man, brother.
30 years old, 29 years old, 5 kids, and I thank you guys. But everybody else, man, get on fire. Fight for the truth, man. I know what I'm telling you guys. There's
I
no
love
God
it.
out there.
This is Terry Barber reminding you there's a women's conference coming up September 7th, 2019 at the Sacred Heart Chapel. Mary Danielle Barber will be speaking along with Barbara Nicolosi. They're going to be talking about true femininity, Be Who You Are. This is going to be for your daughters, your mothers. Every woman should be at this conference. And the way to do it is go to virginmostpowerfulradio.org or call 877-526-2151. Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow! That's 80%! realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
Now, back to Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526-2151. Here's Gary.
And welcome back, everybody. We're chatting with Dr. Douglas Beaumont about cooperating with evil. You know, how do we determine to what degree, you know, is permissible? And Dr. Beaumont's done a great job breaking down those perimeters for us. And for those who are listening, it is a little complex, and so I want to direct you to his website, which is douglasbeaumont.com. It's all one word. And just find the article that says, Should Christian Businesses Support Unchristian Behavior? And he's done a great job breaking down all the terms and, you know, lots of bullet points. And it's a really interesting article. So before the break, Doctor, we were talking about material and formal cooperation, when it's permissible, when it's not, you know, different distances and degrees. Is there anything beyond that you would need to consider?
Yeah, we'll just go over three more things because I know we've got a lot.
That's a good biblical
again,
number.
All of this is in the article. You can print it out and read it at your leisure.
Yes.
But let's just give three more, and then we can kind of look back at this cake thing or analyze something else. But the next kind of cooperation we want to look at is whether it's positive or negative. And positive means that you're actually doing something to support the act. Negative means you're not trying to stop it.
Okay.
So, for example, let's go back to my funny bank thing here. I walk in the bank. Gary has just got done robbing the bank. He's running toward the door, and he says, Doug, hey, man, I'm robbing the bank. Would you mind opening the door for me? So I open the door, and you go running out. All right. So I have positively contributed to you, right? I've actually done something to help. But suppose I walk in the bank, you're running out with the bags, I'm standing there, and the security guard says, hey, stop that guy. He just robbed the bank. And I go, no thanks, and I just hold my hands up, and you go running past me. Now, I could have tripped you. I could have stood in the way. I could have held the door. There's a lot of things I could have done to hinder you, but I don't do any of those things. Well, that's negative cooperation. I'm not doing anything to stop you. And so here, whether it's positive or negative, positive support brings you closer to the evil of the act, and negative takes you farther away.
Okay. Very good.
And then the next, I've been using a lot of distance kind of metaphors, and here's another one, and this really has to do more with what is my cooperation doing for you. So, and this is called immediate versus mediate. An immediate action is something I do directly to support the action. So that would be like opening the door. Okay. But there's also immediate cooperation. There might be something that even happened before the bank robbery that helped you. So, for example, let's say I am the superintendent of the building, and I order that the hinges of the door be oiled that morning because they're kind of squeaky. Well, the fact that the door opened easier for the bank robber is support, right?
Okay.
Now it's incredibly remote. I mean, that isn't even that's barely even part of the action, but
right.
It is there. It is there.
Yeah.
So when we talk about immediate versus mediate, we're really talking about like how close is my cooperation to the committing of the act. And in a lot of cases, it's so far that it's not even really considered part of it. But again, that's where you get these different degrees. And then we'll go to the last one. and this has to do with what's called dispensability. And really what you're asking here is, how important is it that you cooperate with this act? So again, let's say I'm in the bank, there's 30 people in there, bank robber waves the gun around and says, if someone doesn't hold this bag of money for me, I'm going to start shooting people. Well, there's 30 people in the bank. Somebody's going to hold the bag of money, right?
Yeah, right.
Whether it's me or the guy next to me really makes almost no difference at all to the committing of the bank robbery. So that means I'm very dispensable. If I help, it's really not going to matter one way or the other because somebody's going to. If my help is indispensable, that would be like if I'm the only person in the bank, and it's going to seriously mess up the bank robbery if I, Doug Beaumont, don't hold this bag of money. Now I'm kind of indispensable, or at least I'm closer to it. Like I could seriously mess this action up if I don't cooperate versus the other situation where it's really not going to have much of an effect at all, regardless of what I do.
Okay.
So in super summary, quick fashion, those are like all the different things going on in this cooperation analysis. And then you have to kind of like run it through when you're trying to decide whether you want to cooperate or not.
Yeah. So you have material and formal cooperation. You have negative and positive, immediate and mediated, and then dispensable and indispensable. And you're right. I think people just normally, we figure this out in our heads automatically, but we never actually parse it out that way.
And most good philosophy is like that, by the way.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Good philosophy starts with what is obvious and normal people know intuitively, and just seeks to make it a little bit more precise.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. So, okay. Well, why don't we apply this to the cake making case?
Right. So this is what I came up with personally. And again, different people are going to have little different views. But first of all, the kind of cooperation is obviously material, right? Because if this is a Christian cake baker, they're not supporting the homosexual union. So even if they do produce a cake, it's purely material cooperation. So that's good, right? That's definitely on the good side.
So that would be like the bag maker making the bags for the money. It's just part of the material used for the thing, but it's not.
Well, what it means is that you are doing something, but you're not doing it for the reason that the other person's doing it. So I am making a cake, but I'm not doing it because I want to support a homosexual union. I'm doing it because I don't want to be sued, or I just have a business or whatever. But I'm not in agreement with what they're doing.
Okay,
good. That's right. Now, positive versus negative. Now, this is positive, okay, because you're not just not stopping the homosexual union. You're actually doing something that supports it. So it is positive. And so that's not good, but that's pretty typical. It's most of these decisions are not going to be whether or not you try to stop something. It's whether or not you're going to contribute. Immediate versus mediate. I would argue that it's not immediate to the ceremony, although it is fairly immediate to the celebration. So that is, again, that's an area that I don't think I've seen discussed a lot. I think that's something people need to consider. You are a couple more degrees removed from the actual evil, because really it's a thing in support of a thing in support of a thing. So it kind of puts you down the line a little ways. I would say that it's a bit farther away than maybe other people have thought it is. And then finally, I would say that in most cases, it's probably pretty dispensable. Unless this occurs, like for example, this famous Masterpiece cake shop thing. This happened in Denver. I am pretty sure that Masterpiece is not the only cake baker in Denver. Okay.
Yeah, right.
These people definitely have other places they can go.
They didn't corner the market in cake, in other words.
That's right. Yeah. It's not like they're not going to have a cake if Masterpiece doesn't make it. So because it's dispensable, they're going to get a cake. They're going to get one. Even if it's Aunt Martha making the cake, they're going to get one. Nothing's going to change whether they make the cake or somebody else does. So it's definitely a dispensable type of cooperation. So really on almost every evaluative step, making a cake for this is really on kind of the low culpability end of the spectrum. There's really not a lot of moral wrongdoing happening here. But here's where I think the kicker is. and this kind of brings up a whole nother part, but we typically don't talk about this, is that most Christians making a cake like this are very possibly doing so under threat. In other words, there is a very serious consequence to not cooperating. So I think at that point, that is where we have to kind of factor in, what is the good that's going to come of this? If this isn't a super serious wrong, they're not formally cooperating, it's pretty remote from the actual evil. When you put all of that in there, you say, well, I'm not sure that I'm really intrinsically supporting a homosexual union. If I was, then I have to decline. I have to. All right, so suppose they want a cake that says homosexuality is awesome on it. Okay, I can't do that. Whether I get sued or not, too bad. I'm obliged morally to decline. But let's say they just want a cake with rainbows on it. Okay, well, now it's not an intrinsic evil anymore. There's nothing intrinsically evil about a rainbow cake. Now saying no is really kind of morally optional, I would say. You can be a hero like Masterpiece and just say, nope, I'm going to go to the extreme. There's no way I'm doing this any way, shape, or form. That's great. I wouldn't say that they're morally obliged to do that, where they're actually sinning if they say yes. But it's definitely kind of an act of heroism to say no. But then I would go to the next question. Is there serious personal threat? I would say if the answer is no, then I'd go back to declining being an obligation. If you are in full conscience making this cake, you know what it's going to be used for, and there's really no personal threat, I think a Christian needs to say no. However, if there is the threat of serious personal threat, and the cake, the action itself is so far removed and it's not an intrinsic evil, then I think that it's optional to say yes, even heroic to continue to decline.
Yeah. That's kind of like with me holding a gun to your head and saying hold the bag. It
right. Well,
removes the culpability.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you're basically losing freedom. For any action to be rewardable or punishable humanly, it has to be free and it has to be done with full knowledge. So to the degree that I have a gun pointed at my head, my culpability just essentially goes away. If my family's going to be out on the street tomorrow, if this lawsuit goes through and it's just going to ruin the lives of 6 people because I don't make a cake with a rainbow on it, that's a very different thing than showing up to the ceremony, being the best man,
sure.
Being the officiant. Those people are so close to the action that they're absolutely morally culpable for it.
Right. Yeah. Very good. Wow.
The guy that rents the chairs, the guy that provides the balloons. Come on. You're far enough away that it's not sinful to just.
Yeah, very good, man. There are so many different parameters. I didn't even, and you did such a great job going through this. You deserve a medal for, because that's. I mean, thank you for putting in perspective because it isn't so much black and white. There are lots of things we have to look at. So, Doug, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, Gary, anytime.
All right, that's Douglas Beaumont. Everybody, his website is www.douglasbeaumont.com. Check it out. Check out this article. It's kind of cool. He really does break it down into steps. Very easy to follow, but it will, give you a bird's eye view of ethics. Coming up next, High Intensity Catholic Talk with the Terry and Jesse Show. And boy, I can't believe the hour has just flown, folks. It's the fastest hour on Catholic Talk Radio. It's time for me to shut down the Midwest Command Center here, turn off the dojo lights. I hope everybody enjoyed the program. And, God willing, we'll be back again next week to do this thing we call Hands On Apologetics. Hope everybody has a great weekend. God bless. Bye.
In the 1990s, I lived and worked in Hollywood. But when my wife Betty's mom took ill, we relocated to Orange County. And it was during this time in our lives that I converted to Catholicism. Once my eyes were opened to the truth, I couldn't learn enough about the faith. But I had less free time than ever, especially with a long commute. That's when I discovered the real value of Catholic audio. Listening to cassette tapes transformed my daily commute into a miniature retreat. And that's the beauty of Virgin Most Powerful Radio today. Since the podcasts are archived, you can listen anytime on our smartphone app. I know how listening to Catholic audio can bring you closer to Christ and His Church. So I encourage you to visit the App Store or go to vmpr.org and download the app today. It just might change your life. I'm Matthew Arnold for Virgin Most Powerful Radio.